This is John King. I am speaking with Mike Adams. Mike Adams is a professor, and he was also invited to come and speak at the University of Montana here in Missoula, but was denied a speaking engagement by Dean Abramson of the journalism department at University of Montana. I wanted to understand from your point of view, Mike, how you took the rejection and what do you think should have happened?
Well, what's interesting is I didn't know about it until you wrote about it, because I've actually been, unlike most of my speaking engagements, I've been going through a booking agent. Apparently, the benefactor of this lecture series has used someone, because they do this every year, so that's their way of approaching me. And so when I found out about it, certainly shocking, and I just believe that in the interest of free speech, if the folks there in the department, if the dean and other professors and students had problems with my positions on various social and political issues, they should have invited me to discuss them, because that's what we do in higher education. I was only going to speak on the campus for about a half hour, and we had plenty of time for Q&A and also face-to-face meeting time. And as you know, while the speech hasn't been canceled, it's been moved off campus, and I've been asked to sit in the back of the bus, and I'm not taking it very well.
Let me ask you this. One of the things that Mr. Abramson told me personally, I have the audio, I shared it, is that he accused you of hate speech. I wanted to get your reaction to that particular charge.
Well, the dean of a school of journalism needs to understand that the Supreme Court has made it very clear there is no hate speech exception to the First Amendment. Let's be absolutely clear about that. You know, in the Slants case, the controversial trademark case over the summer, they declared that. And it's odd that they even have to declare that, because they've never declared that there was. You see what I'm saying? They're rejecting sort of this cultural notion out there that's spreading in higher education. And it's very problematic because people can sit there and mold hate speech into whatever definition that they want, and sort of pigeonhole any speech they don't like into that category. That's what's so incredibly dangerous about it, because what it really boils down to is when I level an accusation of hate speech against you, all I'm really saying is I hate your speech, and I want to silence you, and I want to get the government to help me do it. And so he may well look at some things that I've written and say, well, that's hate speech. But he has to understand that when he turns around and says, well, his speech is potentially offensive to feminists, and I, as a middle-aged white male, have to prevent the speech, because we all know that if a feminist hears something she disagrees with, she's not going to be able to handle that emotionally. Okay, that's his position. I mean, he actually says that in your interview, that he has got to, he's got to protect the feminist from offensive speech. Well, someone could come along, John, and say, well, isn't that hate speech because it belittles women? And he's not. It's just a really problematic concept, and it's one of the things I intended to speak about.
I wanted to ask you about this. One of the things that came up in the email back and forth between Dean Abramson and Ms. Cole, who organized the speaking engagement, was an accusation that you take the, quote, Christian side of the culture war. And I wanted to get your reaction to that particular claim. It's something I found kind of striking.
Well, it's just absolutely shocking, because I've been doing First Amendment advocacy now for 15 and a half years, something like that. And I know that this kind of religious bigotry lurks in the minds of many college administrators, but I just don't see it so honestly expressed so often. I mean, to put things in perspective, imagine that, say, a Jewish dean were coming to speak on my campus, and I were in charge of deciding whether or not he gets to set foot on campus. And I came up with the excuse that we can't allow him to set foot or speak on our campus because he sides with the Jews in the war in Palestine. Or what if I said he sides with the Jews in the war on terror? I would be rightly accused of being an anti-Semite if I would have said that. But I would never say something like that. Dean Abramson, on the other hand, wears his bigotry like a badge of honor.
I want to get your response to this question, because it comes up in these discussions about free speech, journalism, the ability of the university to kind of make a platform for engagement and intellectual discourse without being, at times, dangerous. There are groups out there, frankly, neo-Nazis, among other types, that would like to have speeches on college campuses. One of these individuals actually comes from Whitefish, Montana, and
Mhm.
I guess his name, by the way, is Mr. Richard Spencer. And
Mhm.
do you feel that there are any lines that a university can draw to prevent certain types of engagements? Do you think, for example, that a Richard Spencer should be denied or could be denied because of the type of rhetoric they produce?
Well, I think that they should allow voices like that. The left should be welcoming those kinds of voices because that is such a powerful tool for their side. I mean, even people like Fred Phelps from Westboro Baptist Church, you want him speaking if you're someone, he's the guy who held up the signs that said God hates fags. And if you're a member of the LGBT community and you're trying to advance that agenda, you want him to speak and you want to film it and you want to use his bad speech to make your better speech look, better in contrast. John Stuart Mill said that one time. He said actually On Liberty in the 18th century, he said that the danger of censorship is twofold. The first danger is that we suppress the truth. But the other thing that we run into the trouble of, the difficulty of, the danger of, is when we censor other ideas, we sometimes deprive people of a greater appreciation of the truth via its juxtaposition with falsity. And so that's why people like Spencer should be allowed to speak on college campuses as well.
Do you consider yourself an anti-feminist?
An anti-feminist? I am. I consider myself to be opposed to the current state of the feminist movement. I really do believe that the feminist movement isn't what it was before. So if you're talking about old-style feminism, for example, when women were fighting for the right to vote, I mean, I like that. But I don't like the current identity politics-based feminism, which is really wrapped up unnecessarily in sexual issues and the issue of abortion. I really consider myself opposed to the overwhelming majority of what they're advancing right now. Does that make sense? I hope that doesn't sound like I'm dodging the question. I do think there are some feminists now who are bringing up some legitimate issues of equality, but I don't see much of that these days. I see a hypersexualized movement that emphasizes abortion to much too great of a degree, and I think that really poses very serious human rights issues.
Final question. In a story that you've published on townhall.com, where you work as a, quote, not journalist, end quote, I noticed that you said that you should be hired as the dean of the journalism department at University of Montana. Why do you think that you would be a better dean?
That was actually tongue-in-cheek, by the way. I have no desire, actually, to be an administrator, but I certainly do want to call into question the competence of this dean. And I'm very serious about this. This isn't to sound mean. It's not to try and sound vicious or that I'm making ad hominem attacks. But the things that he's said, the level of religious animus that he has shown, his willingness to engage in viewpoint discrimination, and his dismissal of contrary views, and quite frankly, what appears to be an ignorance of basic First Amendment law. I think that these are reasons to question his competence as the dean. So I think they could do better. Not that I'm trying to get him fired. That's not what I'm saying. But I really do have questions about this dean's competence. I have to, because this is a severe case.
Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Adams. I'm going to stop my recorder now.